Welcome back, my dear followers. This is the history of the American Mafia, the true story written and adapted by Fabio Fabiano, translated and read by Grace Carlisi. I do hope you enjoy today's new episode. So today's protagonist is Carlo Gambino. The Gambino Mafia family was certainly one of the most powerful families of Cosa Nostra. Its great success is due to Carlo Gambino, a charismatic personality who directed the criminal organization for almost 20 years, from the mid-50s until his death, which occurred from natural causes in 1976. This man, apparently mild and calm, was the head of the organization, moving in the shadows, preferring to be cunning rather than violent. Gambino was linked to traditional mafia values. He was never arrested during his regency. It is said that Mario Puzo, screenwriter of the film The Godfather, was inspired by him when writing the character of Vito Corleone. Carlo Gambino was one of the most powerful mafia bosses of the American Cosa Nostra, and he was considered by the FBI the mafia's boss of bosses. Gambino was born in Palermo, Sicily, to Tommaso and Felice Castellano. In December 1921, at the age of 19, to escape repression against Mussolini's mafia, he emigrated illegally to the USA as a stowaway on an ocean liner belonging to the Florio Company. Settling in Brooklyn, he worked as a butcher for his Castellano relatives who were part of Salvatore d'Aquila's mafia clan. Carlo soon brought his two younger brothers to the USA. In December 1926, Gambino married Catherine Castellano, Joseph and Concetta Cosato's Castellano's daughter, who was born in 1907 in New York. The ceremony took place in Brooklyn, and Gambino's brother Paolo was his best man. Carlo Gambino and his wife established their residence in Brooklyn and had two children. Their daughter Felicia was born in 1927 and Thomas, their son, was born in 1929. During the Castellamarese War, the Castellano faction of the old D'Aquila organization was loyal to Al Mineo, a boss imposed on the underworld by the boss of bosses Giuseppe Masseria. After Mineo's murder in November 1930, Gambino and the Castellanos sided with Salvatore Maranzano. The Gambino Mafia family, together with Albert Anastasia, took up liquor smuggling, clearly following Vincent Mangano's provisions. Mangano was one of the 5 founding fathers of the New York families. Gambino remained in the illicit liquor business even after the end of Prohibition. This cost him a charge for criminal conspiracy for failing to pay the government liquor tax in 1939. The evidence that brought to the charge came from a Fed's illegal wiretap. Therefore, Gambino was acquitted. That same year, he was also accused of theft in Massachusetts, but because he returned the stolen money, he was not prosecuted. In 1935, he ran into trouble with the immigration authorities during a trip to Montreal, Canada, on his return to New York. The American consulate in Montreal refused to give him a visa. He was allowed to re-enter the United States through Rouse's Point in New York. An arrest warrant was issued, but was conveniently quashed by an immigration official. In the late 1930s, US authorities discovered evidence that Gambino was engaged in a stock speculation under an assumed name. At that time, he had strong interests within the management of the Banco di Sicilia, or the Bank of Sicily. In 1939, he was sentenced to serve 22 months in prison for violating tax laws. He served that sentence at the Federal Penitentiary in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. After his release, he and his brother engaged in the theft and sale of American wartime ration stamps. played a prominent role in the Mangano family, which had been led by D'Aquila, Almineo, and then Frank Scalise in the years preceding the 1931 gangland reorganization. He established his residence at 2230 Ocean Parkway, Brooklyn, and worked as an owner in the employment consultancy firm SGS. Narcotic agents were adamant that Carlo and Paolo Gambino were smuggling heroin into the United States through Sicily, in collaboration with the Sicilian crime leader Santo Sorge. Gambino, together with his brother, became rich thanks to the black market. He was considered a black market tycoon. In fact, he managed to pocket millions of dollars, the ration tickets. Gambino used theft and bribery to get hold of huge quantities of food tickets from the Price Control Bureau. The tickets were issued by the OPA offices. Initially, Carlo Gambino's men stole them. Then, when the government began to store them in the banks, Gambino established contact with the OPA staff, that is, the distribution workers, who, once corrupted, began to pass him the cards, which were to be distributed to the population. By using this illegal system, Gambino became an incredibly rich man. After the disappearance of Vincent Mangano and the killing of Albert Anastasia, of which Gambino took part in together with Vito Genovese, he took on the leadership of the family. He was noted among the attendees of the Appalachian National Mob Meeting in 1957. It is likely that his election as head of the former Anastasia crime family was on the agenda of that meeting. His rival within the organization, Armand Thomas Ravel, was also present. It was not simply the way Gambino handled the killing of Albert Anastasia, but also the way he strategically assumed control of the crime family that clearly highlighted boss Carlo Gambino's particular skills. Gambino was exceptional in many ways. He really showed what he was made of, especially after the killing of Anastasia. Carlo Gambino's takeover of the crime family, which he renamed in his own name, was contested primarily by Neil Della Croce and Armand Reva, staunch supporters of Anastasia. The situation was thus resolved by Gambino. Armand Thomas Reva was eliminated by the classical Lupara Bianca, and in the meanwhile he managed to achieve the support of Reva's close friend, Agnello Della Croce, who was appointed his underboss. It would have been almost obvious that at this point the two bosses were to make an attempt on Gambino's life, yet no attempt was ever made. Della Croce and Reva had powerful allies such as Anastasia's brother, Anthony Anastasio, a powerful mobster who ran the Brooklyn docks, and visitor James Squillante, a waste management boss, drug trafficker, and expert gunman. Gambino rose to the top of the crime family not without firing a shot, but by firing far fewer shots than what mafia logic requires. Once he had become the head of one of the largest American mafia families, automatically he became one of the bosses of the National Commission. Another boss, Tredita Brown Lucchese, was brought into the commission. Lucchese had entered the Gambino's family through marriage. His daughter Francesca Lucchese had married Gambino's son Tommy. At this point, Gambino and Lucchese, together with Vito Genovese, formed a solid alliance within the commission, in opposition to the two old-fashioned bosses, Joe Bonanno and Joe Profaci. In 1970, Gambino was charged with criminal conspiracy on receiving stolen property. Due to his poor health, Gambino was released from prison and the trial was postponed for years. On October 15, 1976, Gambino died of heart attack in his home on Long Island. His underboss Agnello Della Croce was supported by many affiliates to become the head of the family, but instead, chose to give the scepter of power to Paul Castellano, who was Carlo Gambino's brother-in-law.